Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. Today, we're going to talk about seasonal affective disorder, stress, and depression. So you may be thinking, Alex, it is March. Why are we talking about seasonal affective disorder? Well, I'll tell you. Even though we are heading into spring and summer, and we tend to think of seasonal affective disorder as being related to fall and winter, you can also get it with the arrival of spring and summer. It tends to be less common for you to get it in spring and summer than in the fall and winter, but we are in new times, so I figured I would mention it just in case, as folks tend to be cooped up indoors right now, just like you are in the wintertime. So, for seasonal affective disorder, what are the signs and symptoms of it? It's not considered a separate disorder from other types of depression. It is simply a form of depression that has a recurring seasonal pattern. So if you notice that you tend to be more depressed in the fall and winter, then you may have specifically seasonal affective disorder. Or also if you have it more in the spring and summer, you may just have a different seasonal pattern. In order to be diagnosed with seasonal affective disorder, just like any other subtype of depression, you have to meet the full criteria for major depression, and it has to coincide with specific seasons, like the winter or the summer months, for at least 2 years. So you have to do that to make sure that it is indeed seasonal and that it has a recurring pattern. The seasonal depressions have to be more frequent than any other type of non-seasonal depression that you may have as well. So symptoms of this are feeling depressed most of the day, nearly every day. So if you're having trouble getting out of bed in the mornings most days and you're laying there for a long time, that could be symptomatic of major depression. You may also feel hopeless or worthless. We want to make sure that we are keeping in mind that with coronavirus, there's a lot more going on in general. But this is talking about these general feelings of hopelessness or worthlessness. Having low energy, this one I think is the most important one for me to identify when I am feeling depressed versus just really sad, and that is losing interest in activities you once enjoyed. If nothing really appeals to you anymore and you don't want to do the hobbies and stuff that you once enjoyed, you may be experiencing a symptom of major depression. If you're having trouble with your sleep, whether that is falling asleep or staying asleep or you're sleeping too much, doesn't have to just be too little, then you may also be experiencing major depression. If you feel sluggish or agitated, or you experience some changes in your appetite or your weight, or you're having trouble concentrating, or if you are having frequent thoughts of suicide or death, then that may be major depression. Specifically, the winter pattern of SAD includes having low energy, hypersomnia, which is excessive sleepiness or sleeping too much, overeating, weight gain, craving carbs, or social withdrawal. So one of my friends refers to that as hibernating. If that's what you're feeling like you have going on in your personal life, then you may be experiencing winter symptoms of SAD. And since it takes 2 years to really get a diagnosis for this, 2 years of this recurrent pattern, I figure any time is a good time to go and mention this to you guys so you can start keeping track of it as well for your doctor. If you are having summer seasonal affective disorder, symptoms of this may include poor appetite and associated weight loss, insomnia, feeling agitated, restless, or anxious, or having episodes of violent behavior. So they do seem to have some interesting differences between what's going on in the winter pattern versus the summer pattern. So they don't necessarily look exactly the same. Some risk factors that may increase the likelihood of you having seasonal affective disorder include being female. So this is diagnosed 4 times more often in women than in men. Although I do want to mention the caveat here that in general, women are more likely to go seek out therapy or seek out treatment for depression than men are. This information comes from the National Institute of Mental Health, so it is a solid reference material, but I do want to notate that in general, that there are different types of demographic issues that may underlie the data that scientists are able to obtain in regards to this. So even though women are 4 times more diagnosed with seasonal affective disorder than men, that does not necessarily mean the same thing as them being 4 times more likely to obtain it. It just means 4 times more likely to seek out help necessarily. So you can certainly still be male or non-binary and be experiencing seasonal affective disorder as well. I don't want you guys to think that the statistics are like, oh no, I'm probably fine. I'm probably just sad. Keep in mind that it is also a reporting issue. So if you live far from the equator, then you are going to be more likely to have this as well. That is both for people who live far north or far south of it. So 1% of folks who live in Florida have seasonal affective disorder and have at least sought out treatment for it, whereas 9% of folks who live in New England or Alaska suffer from it. So you can see that the latitude is significantly different between these areas, and it is corresponding even on opposite sides of the United States regarding east and west, that New England and Alaska are still 8% higher than Florida, which is significantly closer to the equator. Also, if you have a family history of other types of depression, it doesn't necessarily have to be the seasonal affective disorder type, then you are more likely to develop seasonal affective disorder than folks who don't have that family history of depression. If you have depression or bipolar disorder, then your symptoms can also worsen with the seasons. However, you only tend to get diagnosed with seasonal affective disorder if your seasonal depressions are more common than your other forms of depression and mood disorders. People who are younger also have a higher risk of seasonal affective disorder than older adults. So they are saying younger adults specifically, not kids. And seasonal affective disorder has also been reported in children and teenagers. So anyone can really be affected. You are just more likely to be affected by it if you're younger. They're still not sure what the specific causes are, but they've done some research over the years and found a few biological clues in that regard. It may be related to your mood. It may be related to neurotransmitters or hormones or even levels of vitamins in your body. They aren't entirely sure about that just yet, but we're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss the possible causes of seasonal affective disorder. Stay tuned.
Are you looking to learn more about the latest trends from the fitness world? Are you confused by all of the different trends that are out there? The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place for you. The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place to come for people of all skill and interest levels. Join us as we explore the latest trends in the fitness world. Does that new exercise really work? Should I try yoga? Whatever your question, chances are good you'll find an answer on the GSMC Fitness Podcast.
Before the break, we were introducing seasonal affective disorder, including its risk factors and signs and symptoms. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what might be causing it, and then also some treatments and therapies. So for seasonal affective disorder, they've done a few different studies, and it may be related to neurotransmitter involvement, hormones, or even the amount of vitamins in your body. So people with SAD may have some difficulty regulating serotonin. And serotonin, as most of us know from previous episodes, is a really important neurotransmitter that can affect your mood. So one study performed by researchers found that people who had SAD had 5% more serotonin transponder proteins in winter months than they did in summer months. So if you have these higher serotonin transporter proteins, that means you have less serotonin available at your synapses. That's because the transponder's job is to recycle serotonin back into the presynaptic neuron. So essentially, you have more serotonin transponder proteins in winter months, essentially recycling these serotonin neurotransmitters back into the presynaptic neuron, so they're not coming into contact with their receptors like they should be. They are essentially pulled back before they're able to do their jobs and then are recycled. So you don't necessarily even have to have lower serotonin levels if you have these higher levels of the mechanism that is causing it to be reabsorbed into the presynaptic area before it can do what it needs to do. Some folks combat this with medication, like SSRIs. So those are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Now that we know that one of the mechanisms by which seasonal depression is thought to affect the body is in the correlation with having about 5% more serotonin transporter proteins recycling the serotonin before it can be used, then we can understand that selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors means that recycling or that reuptake ability is kind of removed or suppressed a little bit to make sure that the serotonin is getting used instead of being recycled too early. So that is the most common type of prescribed antidepressants. If you've heard of Prozac or Celexa or Zoloft, those are all SSRIs. So in addition to combating the associated 5% increase in those recycling or transporter proteins, having SSRIs can also help with other forms of depression because they interrupt that normal process of how serotonin works. So normally, once your neurotransmitters like serotonin have transmitted the neural impulses that they are responsible for, then they get reabsorbed into the body. So they normally get recycled even after they have done their job. So the SSRIs just prevent them from being recycled as well. And then you have a corresponding higher level of serotonin able to interact with those synapses. So that is something I think is pretty fascinating regarding serotonin and the medication for it and how that works with depression. And serotonin receptors don't just mess with your mood. They don't just affect your mood. Your serotonin receptors also influence other types of biological processes in your brain and in the rest of your body, like mediating aggression, anxiety, appetite, how you learn and remember things, your cognition, nausea, sleep, and even how you're regulating your body's temperature. There's a lot that's going on with serotonin. So it really makes sense when you look at it from this perspective and see why a lot of doctors really believe it's tied to depression, because it's correlating with these depressive symptoms of being more anxious or aggressive, or messing with your appetite, making it hard for you to sleep or to think or remember things. Now, while serotonin involvement is one of the leading correlations between what's going on in the body and how that is impacting your mood, other studies have also hypothesized that people with seasonal affective disorder specifically may overproduce melatonin, which is a hormone. So I know a lot of folks in my personal life will take melatonin to help them go to sleep. And that can be really helpful for a lot of folks. Darkness increases the production of melatonin, which is what regulates sleep. So when it's darker in the winter months, then melatonin production tends to increase. And then people who have seasonal affective disorder tend to feel sleepier. They may also be lethargic and experience some delays in their circadian rhythms, causing them to perhaps fall asleep much later and sleep longer into the day. According to some sleep scientists, like Dr. Rahman at Harvard Medical School, our energy, our alertness, our mood, and our sleep are all associated with their circadian rhythm. And the amount of light that we're exposed to can really mess with that. So for example, Dr. Rahman says that indoor electrical lighting is about 100 to 1,000 times dimmer than natural sunlight. This electrical indoor lighting is also 100 to 1,000 times brighter at night than if we were to be out in nature at night. So essentially, by being indoors a lot, we are getting too little light during the day and too much light at night. So it messes with our circadian rhythms. It messes with our sleep. It can also mess with our mood. It's not lining up with our physiology. And that really makes sense, considering that we've learned that darkness increases the production of your melatonin to help regulate your sleep. So even just being indoors so much can really affect your melatonin production. It can make you feel sleepier in general and more lethargic and give you sleep problems. So that's something I really wanted to highlight right now, as we are all spending a lot more time indoors with the quarantine and the lockdowns. But if you go ahead and look at the rules for those specific lockdowns in your area, you will often find that it lists exercise each day as a necessary activity. It's an essential activity that you're still allowed to go out and perform. You just should not be meeting up with your friends for it, and you should not be hanging out with anyone who you are not already cohabitating with in the lockdown for this. Also, stay at least 6 feet apart from anyone else you may encounter on your journey. Don't go to the playground and touch the things at the playground, and don't be touching like handrails and stuff like that. I would be mindful of that. But a lot of these lockdowns do allow you to go outside and just not have contact with other people, but to get this exercise. And even just getting 30 to 45 minutes of sunlight per day can be really helpful for you. So I went for a walk earlier around my apartment complex with my roommate. We made sure we stayed at least 6 feet apart from everyone else who happened to also be out trying to get sunlight, and we didn't touch anything that was not absolutely necessary to touch. Was it hard to not pet the neighbors' dogs when I saw them out and about? Yes, it absolutely was. But on the bright side, I got to see dogs from a distance, and that part was nice. And I still was complying with the rules of the lockdown procedures for San Antonio. So you can also Google the rules that are specific to your area and see if you're also allowed to go out and get some of this sunlight. If you have a patio or a porch that has at least that 6-foot distance from other people, go out for 30 minutes or so and get you some sunlight, even if you're not necessarily getting exercise, or you're getting your exercise perhaps indoors on an exercise bike. Still going outside for a little bit is good for you. Just make sure that you're complying with the lockdown protocols as you do so. All right, we're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk some more about biological clues associated with seasonal affective disorder and some ways that we can treat it.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing seasonal affective disorder and some biological issues that may be related to it, including overproduction of melatonin by your body when it is darker out or when you're spending more time indoors, because darkness here means not getting natural sunlight in a few ways as well. So the blue lighting is also going to influence your melatonin production and mess with your circadian rhythm, because any type of light outside the boundaries of our normal day and night cycle is going to mess with that quite a bit. But getting actual sunlight is the most important factor. You can buy special bulbs that are meant to mimic natural sunlight and to dim and brighten throughout the day, like the Brilli lights, but nothing is going to be a true substitute for natural sunlight, especially if you can get that earlier in the day to help with your melatonin regulation. So keep that in mind. Right now, though, we're going to talk about vitamin D, because people who are affected by seasonal affective disorder may also produce less vitamin D. And vitamin D is thought to play a role in serotonin activity. Remember, we did an episode on vitamin D a while back, and I encourage you to check that one out as well if you'd like to learn more about it. 90% of our vitamin D is produced in our body through mechanisms associated with exposure to sunlight. So again, whether it is melatonin or vitamin D, it's telling us we need to have some more sunlight. And additionally, since vitamin D is believed to play a role in serotonin activity, that's why we say that we need to go outside for our mood. So there are 3 different biological hypotheses specifically for associations with seasonal affective disorder, and they are definitely backed up by substantive evidence. We're just not sure exactly how these roles play out and how they correspond with each other. Some scientists think that depression causes you to have more of these serotonin transponder proteins, and others think that the serotonin transponder proteins and that 5% increase is what's causing the depression. So they're just trying to figure out how these are interacting with each other and in which direction they are acting. So vitamin D, melatonin, and serotonin production and activity are all associated with the amount of natural sunlight you're exposed to and also how much light you're exposed to throughout the day. Vitamin D insufficiency may also be associated with other types of clinically significant depression symptoms. So really what it's saying is make sure that while we're spending more time indoors, that we are still getting some sunlight. Open up your blinds or your windows so that you can get this sunlight in the air. Open up your curtains. And if you're able to leave your home under your lockdown procedures, or you're able to sit out on your balcony, go ahead and try to do so while there's sunlight out, especially earlier in the day, to help you regulate your hormones, your neurotransmitters, and also your vitamin D activity in your body. Even if you aren't feeling depressed at this point, or you're not feeling like you have these symptoms of seasonal affective disorder, an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure, and we are trying to head this off at the pass, just like we are trying to head off coronavirus at the pass by implementing these lockdown protocols. So all of our habits are changing, and we need to be mindful about how this can impact the rest of our health and wellness. So we're going to flatten that curve and also stay ahead of the depression curve by keeping an eye on our mood and our exposure to sunlight. So regarding treatments and therapies for seasonal affective disorder, there are 4 major types: medication, light therapy, psychotherapy, and vitamin D. Sometimes they're used alone, sometimes they're used in combination. As we discussed earlier, SSRIs are used to treat SAD, in addition to another type of antidepressant called bupropion. So with all medications, there can potentially be side effects. You need to make sure that you talk to your doctor about any possible risks of using any type of medication. And you may go through a few different types of antidepressant medications before you find one that improves your symptoms without giving you side effects. So we are all different in our bodies, and one person's underlying cause for their depression may not be the same as someone else's. Remember, we talked about a few different hypotheses for what can cause it, and if they find one to be fully true, that doesn't mean that the others cannot also cause it or have a compounding impact. So what works for one person may not work for another person. But it's always good to get a recommendation from folks and see what's going on. So your doctor and your pharmacist are going to have the best information, but you can even talk to your friends if you're just entertaining the idea and you want a little bit more information in a friendly context. So for me, I'm on certain types of medication, and some of my friends were experiencing similar symptoms, and so I said, hey, you should go and talk to the doctor about this. In fact, I recommend my doctor, and you should go in and tell her how you're feeling. She will give you the depression index to figure out how affected you are and go from there and help you pick out some medication that's right for you. And I had tried a couple of different medications before, and some of those didn't work for me, but that's okay. I tried them for at least 3 months because I did not have any wild side effects that were particularly problematic and would have caused me to go ahead and need to go off of it immediately. But I tried each of them for a few months with my doctor's guidance and her prescriptions, and they didn't work for me. And that's okay. But I did find one that did work for me. And so I recommended that to my friends, and I recommended my doctor because she's so easy to talk to, and that is why I still drive 45 minutes to an hour to go see her. And they now also drive 45 minutes to an hour to go see her. And it's been very helpful for them. We're still all trying to figure out the balance of our medications and the different types of additional treatment, like light therapy or having more vitamin D, or also just working on our dosages and seeing what works. But keep in mind that you're going to have to try a specific dosage for a little bit to see if it's going to work for you. It's not just, oh, okay, I tried this for a week and now I want to go ahead and go up to 40 milligrams. You have to try it for a while to let it build up in your body, because SSRIs tend to take a little bit to work in your body, and it requires you to build them up over time. Very similar to how birth control works. You need to give it time to build up in your body, and then you have to maintain its presence in your body. So if you are familiar with taking birth control pills, then it is kind of like that. It's not like Xanax or, any of the benzodiazepines that you can take once for like acute anxiety and feel the effects with a single dosage. That's not how Prozac works. Just like that's not how birth control tends to work. So just keep that in mind when you are considering talking to your doctor about these medications. Definitely let them know if you're having side effects, but also keep in mind that you are going to have to work your way through a few months of this and alter dosages over time. It's a long-term type of journey that you're going through with your doctor as your partner and figuring out what works best specifically for you. But also keep in mind that you may not end up having to be on the medication for the rest of your life. Some of my friends right now are on a step-down program with their doctor where they're getting to gradually reduce their dosage in a very safe and controlled manner, and soon they're not going to have to be on it anymore because their bodies are now maintaining their moods on their own. And so that is really exciting for them. I am stoked for my friends who are getting to go off of those meds, but I don't think you should ever be ashamed of needing to reach out for medication. No one is going to judge you for taking flu medication when you are sick and you're having these flu symptoms. And I don't think that anyone should judge you for taking medication for mental health symptoms either. I certainly won't judge you for it. All right, we're going to go on a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some more treatments for seasonal affective disorder.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about some treatments and therapies for seasonal affective disorder, and we mostly discussed SSRIs. Now we're going to discuss light therapy. So light therapy has been a regular treatment for social anxiety disorder since the good old 1980s. And the concept is just to replace the diminished amount of sunshine that you get in the fall and winter months, just due to it naturally being darker, by exposing you to bright artificial light daily. So some of the symptoms associated with seasonal affective disorder can be relieved by sitting in front of a light box first thing in the morning every day from the early fall until spring, if that is the era in which you are experiencing your seasonal affective disorder. This light therapy seems to largely be associated with the winter form of it. Generally, these light boxes work by filtering out UV rays, and they take about 20 to 60 minutes of exposure to a 10,000 lux level of cool white fluorescent light. And that amount is just about 20 times greater than ordinary indoor lighting. So this is special artificial light, but remember, nothing is a perfect substitute for natural sunlight. So if you're able to sit in front of a light box first thing in the morning, or you get to choose between that and sitting outside for 20 to 60 minutes first thing in the morning to get that natural sunlight, they would recommend that you get the natural sunlight. However, we are also in an era of a lockdown, and some of us may not be able to actually go outside because of proximity issues. So in that case, you may want to consider getting one of these light boxes. That way, you can also just sit in front of the light box no matter what you're doing. You can do it while you're checking your emails for work first thing in the morning, even if you, in your work-at-home capacity, are now just rolling out of bed in your pajamas 5 minutes before your shift starts. In addition to light therapy, you can also participate in psychotherapy, specifically cognitive behavioral therapy. So, traditional cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, has also been adapted for specific use with seasonal affective disorder. So it uses basic techniques of cognitive behavioral therapy, like identifying negative thoughts and replacing them with more positive ones, but with the addition of a technique called behavioral action. So behavioral action is meant to help the person who is depressed identify activities that they enjoy, whether indoors or outdoors, to help improve with coping with the ability to not go outside necessarily. So it's usually to improve your ability to cope with winter, but I think that in this context, it may also prove efficacious. Now, I am not a psychotherapist by any means. This is just me going, hey, these two things have a lot in common in that mandorla of their Venn diagram. Perhaps this may also be helpful for you. If you're interested in that, I urge you to reach out to a counselor who offers CBT and see if that is something that is helpful for you during this time. A lot of therapists can also now be reached over the internet, especially through apps like BetterHelp, or just going on for a virtual appointment from your computer. So there are multiple options. Some of them you don't even have to literally speak to a person. You can type it to them. So if that's easier for you to start out that way, you can also go in that direction. Some of those apps and virtual services are very useful in that regard for folks who maybe aren't ready to say things out loud, but are able to perhaps type them. Another form of treatment for seasonal affective disorder is vitamin D. So right now, vitamin D supplementation on its own is not found to be an effective way to treat SAD. And that is because low blood levels of vitamin D were found in people who had seasonal affective disorder. And those low levels are usually due to not eating enough of it and not having enough exposure to the sun. So you need to get it from the sun largely. 90% of your vitamin D production comes from the sun and only about 10% from your diet. So definitely still try to get it via dietary intake. But in that regard, you don't really want to just take supplements. Try to eat foods that have vitamin D in them naturally. Any dietitian or nutritionist will tell you that you should be getting most of your vitamins and minerals from your food. So when we think about eating food, we aren't just thinking about carbs or other types of macros or calories. It's also important to think about the vitamins and minerals. I think that's largely an underutilized portion of nutrition facts labels, and I encourage you guys to check that out. So if you're feeling sad, go ahead and work on eating something that has vitamin D in it. Maybe have some milk and cookies. The cookies are not necessarily going to be chock full of vitamin D, but depending upon the type of milk that you drink, your milk largely will be. So check that out. Find other methods of getting this into your body. You can eat all kinds of different foods that have vitamin D in them. You can also listen to our vitamin D episode for more information, but a quick TLDR of foods that have a lot of vitamin D include fatty fish, so tuna, salmon, mackerel, also some fortified products like dairy products, orange juice, even soy milk, cereals, beef liver, cheese, egg yolks. There are a lot of options for you. Researchers tend to be split, though, on the use of vitamin D supplementation for being effective in treating seasonal affective disorder. And in that regard, some studies have found it to be as effective as light therapy, and others found that vitamin D had no effect. So they are still trying to determine the discrepancies between these studies and see what exactly is going on. So if you are looking for something as a treatment that is not medication based, then go ahead and go outside. You're going to get vitamin D naturally from the sun as well, and then you're also getting light therapy. So 2 birds, 1 stone in that regard. You can also speak with somebody. So go ahead and work on a gratitude journal to start with. That's going to help you promote more positive thinking in your life. And I'm not someone who is very into self-help books or like the power of positive thinking in general. I do think there's such a thing as toxic positivity. So I'm not saying you should try to avoid all negative emotions in your life by any means. That is just part of life, and avoidance is not a healthy coping mechanism either. However, what I am saying is that training our brains to be kinder to ourselves by removing any of those degrading negative thoughts, the ones that are involved in promoting self-loathing or feelings of helplessness or worthlessness or hopelessness, we can work on addressing those with more positive thoughts, because those thoughts are not really giving us a good return on our investment. So we're spending that time with these negative feelings, but nothing is coming from them. No change is taking place in us that is going to help us get past that. But by trying to see more of the positive things and framing it like Mr. Rogers might, then I think that can be really helpful. And what I mean by that is that instead of focusing on how harrowing a lot of things are out there right now, Mr. Rogers would say that in times of crisis, you should always look for the helpers. They're always there, and it can be very heartening to see them in action. They remind us that we're not alone and that the situation is not hopeless. They can also give us hope. So maybe think about talking to somebody, specifically a counselor, if that is your jam. You can also take medication for it. No judgment. I respect everyone's decisions about their own personal treatment choices regarding using medication or these other methods that have been proven effective. It is up to you and your doctor to figure out what works best for you. We're going to go on another quick break, and when we come back, we are going to discuss how warmer weather can affect depression and other mental health issues.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about treatments for seasonal affective disorder, including vitamin D, light therapy, and psychotherapy. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how hotter weather can create more stress and impact mental health issues. So for seasonal depression, we discussed how it normally is associated with darker months, and those just happen to also tend to be cooler months. However, there is also a summer type of seasonal affective disorder, and we found that the types of symptoms for that may look quite a bit different from the more common type that occurs in the winter. In general, though, warmer weather can actually impact your health in adverse ways as well, even when it's unrelated to seasonal affective disorder. Some researchers have found that on cooler days, people are less likely to report having days of bad mental health. And on hotter days, that probability of them reporting bad days of mental health has increased. They have defined for this study that comfortable weather is between 60 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Anything below that 60 degrees is considered to be cooler days, and anything warmer than 70 degrees is going to be included in the hotter days. So that 60 to 70 degrees is our sectioning point. And a sectioning point in research is what separates the levels of two different items that we are comparing. So this is the normal or the midline of it, and anything outside of that 10 degree boundary is going to be either hotter or cooler. So hotter temperatures tend to get to people and start really bothering them after about 10 days in a row of hotter weather. But cooler days have an immediate effect. Scientists have also recently found that more folks express negative emotions and higher suicide rates as the temperature rises. In a specific study, the researchers looked at the day-to-day fluctuations of county-level temperatures and also self-reported mental health for more than 3 million Americans between the years of 1993 and 2010. So this is like a 17-year longitudinal study, and it was compiled by the CDC via phone surveys. So that's where this data came from, and it's a great sample size, but they are not able to have access to all of the demographic and socioeconomic information for that right now. So they want to explore that and see whether how much money a person makes affects that, and how different demographics of where people live and what that population really looks like, to examine some other variables that we may not be aware of right now. They also want to look into future research to see how community level factors, like how well folks get along with their neighbors, what their neighborhood environment's like, as well as individual adaptations, like folks who get air conditioning, or if you don't like how the temperature is where you are, you migrate somewhere else. They want to see how those types of variables mediate the effects of temperature on different people's mental health. Some previous studies have found that the observed increase in heat-related deaths could have been related to the absence of air conditioning, and they want to know if maybe that also corresponds for mental health. I thought that article was very interesting, and they were also trying to look at it from an economic perspective, so they will be continuing that study in the future and hopefully have some more answers for us. Interestingly, some studies have also found that you can get a psychosomatic fever related to stress. So in this case, instead of the heat being seen as coming before the stress, really, then it looks like you can get a temperature from being stressed already. It's called a psychogenic fever, and it's caused by exposure to emotional events or even chronic stress. Dr. Takakazu Oka of the Kyushu University Graduate School of Medical Sciences specifically studies this and has been releasing publications in this regard. He mostly studies students in Japan who are under academic stress. Dr. Oka says that due to many doctors not completely understanding how stress can affect your body temperature, a lot of folks who have psychogenic fevers are diagnosed with an unknown cause for their symptoms. Dr. Oka says that his patients complain not only of the fever itself, but also symptoms from the stress that they're under and any psychiatric diseases that the patient may suffer from, like anxiety or depression. So body temperature in this case is considered by Dr. Oka to just be one factor. He says a lot of his patients ask for a treatment for their fever and not just for the temperature to be normalized, but he likes to take a holistic approach and treat all of the symptoms. There are several different treatment options that he draws upon, but generally they're pretty similar to treating other types of stress-related disorders and are not specific to the psychogenic fever. He does think that a breakthrough in treatment will occur in the future, though, as he thinks that more folks will start looking at these psychosomatic fevers. He said that even the doctors did not believe the fever is caused or related to psychological stress, but recent animal studies have made doctors more aware of that possibility. Dr. Oka likes to refer to this as functional hyperthermia instead of just psychogenic fever. And he says that using the word functional in the terminology would help prevent stigmatizing his patients. He thinks that in the clinical setting, it also connotes both stress-related pathology and impaired functioning of the autonomic nervous system. And he thinks that getting both of those things across is very important for the understanding of the disorder and also for treating the patients. In addition to the psychogenic fever, you can also have other symptoms that are physical that are associated with stress. That can include an increased heart rate and blood pressure, rapid breathing or shortness of breath, tension in your muscles, headaches, nausea, or even dizziness. So if your stress levels stay high or you are experiencing frequent or chronic stress, then your risk of getting sick actually increases. So I wanted to mention that because I know that there's a lot going on right now that can definitely be contributory regarding stress. So for having to work at home with other people, even if you're used to working at home like I am, I have been surprisingly bothered in a few ways by someone else being at home with me. I did not really expect that, and it's not even something that my roommate is doing. It's just rather the presence of more noise in the house than that to which I am accustomed. So it's the noises in the background as I'm trying to record and having to change my schedule around a little bit because there are other people in the house who also need quiet while they are in video conferences and stuff like that. It's not perturbing me to any great degree because I do recognize that there is nothing either of us can really do about that. And I ascribe to the school of thought that says that if by worrying about something you cannot turn the sun back by an hour or make any significant changes that would alleviate that worry or that stress, then you shouldn't stress about it. But that has even surprisingly bothered me in working at home. So even if folks in your life already were working from home and this doesn't seem like it's that different to them, they may surprisingly have some more symptoms related to stress in other people being in that bubble and working at home and just being around people more frequently. So in general, we are all prone to experiencing more stress right now. But I think that one really important factor is that maintaining a level head in this situation can help prevent it. If you are feeling extra stressed, go for that walk in the safe, lockdown prescribed way that we discussed earlier. Get you some time alone. If you have other folks in the house with you who are able to care for the kids a little bit, see if you can maybe work out a rotating schedule so that everyone gets a little bit of me time as well to reduce this stress. For me, a lot of times that means playing music, but I can't do that in the middle of the day like I used to be able to because I have someone else in here who is in a video conference call when I really just want to play my electric guitar. So it works a little bit different for everyone regarding our schedules and maybe even the types of catharsis we tend to turn to for our stress. But it's important that we do work on educating ourselves and work on our patience and maintaining a level head so that we don't get any of these other symptoms associated with stress. Also, a lot of these symptoms that are associated with stress and are commonly caused by stress also sound a lot like flu symptoms. So that increased heart rate and blood pressure, shortness of breath, muscle tension, headaches, nausea, dizziness. Those have a lot of symptoms in common with the flu and with coronavirus, and you don't want to scare yourself more by being so stressed that you get some of these symptoms and then think that you have something worse, when really we just need to chill out a little bit. So go ahead and relax those shoulders. Go ahead and roll them back a couple times and then let them sit. Drop them. Relax your jaw a little bit and go drink you some water, you guys. Let's work on lowering our stress and perhaps meditate this evening or take some time to quietly read a book and see if that helps you out a lot too. Because the more stressed we are, not only may we exhibit these symptoms related to stress, but it can also negatively impact our immune system. We also have another episode on stress from when I first started here with GSMC, if you'd like to go back in the archive a little bit and learn some more about stress. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss some facts about stress and a quick hit list for things we can do to combat it.
GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast gives you advice on everything from hair to fashion to skincare products. We'll talk about the latest trends in makeup, hairstyles, and anti-aging remedies. And we'll cover all of the newest fashion trends. If you have an interest in or questions about the beauty trends that might work best for you, the Golden State Media Concepts Beauty Tips Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Can be psychosomatic, including in causing fevers and other symptoms that are flu-like in nature, as well as lowering your immune system. Now we're going to talk about stress in general and how we can combat that. So the first thing to know is that you are not alone. Everyone experiences stress periodically. There are all different kinds of stress as well. It's important to address it and to not just try to shoulder the burden because it can affect you physically as well as mentally. Everyone has their threshold as well. So a stressor, something that causes you stress, can be a one-time occurrence. It can be temporary and short term, or it can happen repeatedly over a long time. In our previous stress episode, we discussed how that chronic stress is what can really get you. So some folks cope with stress a lot more effectively and easily than other people, just because we're all different. And other folks are able to recover from stressful events more easily than others. That's our resilience. So some types of stress that you may experience include pressure from school, work, family, society, any other types of daily responsibilities as well. Any sudden negative changes like losing your job or illness or divorce. And a lot of folks are experiencing stuff like that right now as our unemployment rate in the US has been climbing as a result of coronavirus. So traumatic stress in general that you may experience like in a big accident, an assault, a natural disaster, a war, or even what's going on right now, it can give you some very distressing, temporary emotional and physical symptoms, but a lot of folks tend to recover naturally soon after that. If this is extending for you and you are having chronic anxiety and traumatic stress about what's going on right now, then I encourage you to reach out to someone and speak with them about it. Speak with your doctor as well. However, not all stress is technically bad. Stress is really letting you know that you are preparing to face a threat or flee for safety. They've also expanded the fight or flight concept in recent years to include fawning or freezing. So these are situations where your body feels that something is going on that you need to respond to. So your heartbeat quickens. You're going to have some shortness of breath, perhaps from breathing faster. Your muscles get all tensed because they are preparing for action. And then your brain is going to use a lot more oxygen and increase general activity. You may also feel nauseous because your blood supply is going away from your stomach and to the rest of your muscles. That's why you get that feeling in the pit of your stomach. And then you are trying to prepare your body essentially for this reaction. Your body, though, cannot tell the difference between physical stress and mental stress or emotional distress. It just knows that something is going on that makes you feel threatened. So sometimes folks feel motivated by non-life-threatening stress, like when you have to take a test or things that a lot of us feel really stressed out by, like having to interview for a new job or starting a new job or starting at a new school. And it can be motivating and it can make us go, okay, I'm going to make friends this time. I'm really going to put myself out there, or, I'm going to study super hard for this test, or I'm going to really prepare for this interview. And it can make a positive difference in your life by just giving you some motivation. So sometimes it can be really bad because it doesn't have an outlet really. But with these temporary things like a test or this job interview, these tend to be one-time events, and then you can move on to the next thing. That stressor is not still going to be there. It's just simply served as a motivator to help you get stuff done, which is what stress is meant to do in your body. Long-term stress, however, can be really bad for you. Your body in that regard is not getting a clear signal that the stress is over, so you can return to functioning. There is no more threat, so you can go back to doing what you were going to do. If you have chronic stress and that signal is not telling you to go back to normal, then it can really start messing with your digestive system. It can mess with your immune system, your sleep, your cardiovascular system, even your reproductive systems. For some people, it is mainly going to be digestive in nature. So, for example, when I get very stressed out, then I feel nauseous and I am generally just not hungry for a long time until that stress kind of dissipates. That's mostly just in the case of extreme stress for me. Some folks, though, may have a headache They might have trouble sleeping or dealing with sadness, anger, or feeling irritable all the time. And over time, continued strain on your body from being stressed can lead to some serious health issues like heart disease or high blood pressure, diabetes, and other types of illnesses like depression or anxiety. Fortunately, there are ways to manage stress. You can go ahead and just be observant to the stress in your body. So if you're starting to be more irritable than normal, you may be stressed, particularly if you are chronically irritable. Being quick to anger can be a symptom of long-term stress. It can also be a symptom of depression or anxiety. You want to make sure you're listening to your body. So if you're drinking more than you usually are, or you get upset more easily, or you feel depressed, you're not enjoying things that you used to, if you don't have a lot of energy, then you may very well just be very stressed and it's leading to depression. You can also talk to your healthcare provider or a health professional about your stress. Sometimes they will ask you about it on the little forms when you go in, or your doctor will ask about it if it is something that is related to your other health concerns, like if you have cardiovascular issues or depression or anxiety. But they might not always. Don't wait for them to ask you about it. If it's bothering you, ask somebody about your stress. See if there's something that your medical professional can help you with. See if they know anything about all these other symptoms. What might seem like unrelated symptoms to you, including stress, may actually make a lot of sense to them diagnostically. And they may go, hey, we've been looking for what exactly is going on with you. And now that you mentioned that you're very stressed, that might be the missing puzzle piece that they need. Because a lot of people look uncomfortable in doctors' offices, and a lot of people also put on their business face when they go to doctors' offices to mask that discomfort. So people present in a variety of different emotions to doctors, and also what psychologists call like your affect. So that is the way that you are expressing your emotions as well. You can have a blank affect where, the light's not really reaching your eyes and your tone is really flat and you're coming across a certain way. Or you may have an affect somewhere else on the spectrum. It's about your expression, your emotional expression as well, your body language. So they are not necessarily going to be able to tell by how you look when you come in there, because they're not seeing you in different contexts and they don't know what's normal for you and what is not. They only see you in that context. So in that regard, make sure you reach out to them. It is totally normal to feel stressed. Everyone feels it at a certain point, and it is definitely okay to let your doctor know that you're feeling stressed and you would like some type of guidance regarding how you can deal with it. You can also try to get regular exercise. Getting even just 30 minutes per day of walking can help boost your mood and improve your health, especially if you combine that with the light therapy right now. So I know a lot of gyms are closed everywhere, as they should be, as we are working on mitigating the coronavirus spread right now. But you can still follow those lockdown guidelines in your walking if you are allowed to leave your home, and get some light therapy as well as some exercise. You can also try relaxing activity. If you're into puzzles like I am, get out your puzzle and start working on it. You can do some of those muscle relaxation exercises and breathing exercises we've discussed in previous episodes as well. Set you some goals and priorities. Remember, we are not trying to make perfect decisions right now, just better ones. We need to know that, okay, there are certain things I can't do when I'm working from home, and I am going to do my best to do everything else, but some things can't get done in certain contexts, and that is not your fault. That is a function of the system. If you are getting super overwhelmed with this and they ask if you can take on this new task, you can say no. There is a lot of power to be found in saying no. You want to be able to do what you can, but A lot of folks, when they move to working from home, will also start overextending themselves. And they'll be like, oh, well, I can do that from here. I'll just go ahead and stay for another hour. And then that leads to another 2 hours. And that leads to more and more being on your plate. Make sure you're taking time for you. And it's okay to just be mindful of what you have not accomplished at the end of the day and prioritize that for the next day. But also be mindful about what you have accomplished at the end of the day. So it's important to go, okay, I didn't necessarily get everything done that I wanted to get done, but I did get a lot done. I got something significant done, and I have a game plan for how I'm going to tackle this tomorrow, and it's at the top of my priority list. So I can go and relax for a little bit. You also want to stay connected. So remember to reach out for folks for emotional support right now. And also practical help. A lot of your friends might not be so great at listening to you talk about how things are going in your life, but they might really be able to help you practically. So go ahead and reach out to your friends. Everyone's different in their love languages and how they offer help and how they prefer to receive help. And it's important that we perhaps work on those skills together right now too. And if you're having trouble with that stress, reach out to your friends and just reach out and check on your friends in general, you guys. Even if you haven't talked to them in a long time, perhaps especially if you haven't talked to them in a long time, now could be a good time to reconnect. Also, if you're overwhelmed by stress, as always, ask for help from a health professional. If you are in general having trouble right now, I encourage you to call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That number is 1-800-273-TALK, T-A-L-K, or 1-800-273-8255. They're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that Lifeline chat is a service available to everyone. It is confidential and it is toll-free. So if you or a loved one is having thoughts of suicide right now, then go ahead and reach out. Even if you're not sure that you feel like you're going to act on it, you can go ahead and reach out to them, and they are there to help. Take care of yourselves and each other. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Health and Wellness Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.